that's when I realized that, I'm going to university for a different reason. For me, academics only plays a part of that.
Welcome back to GenZ Talks, and today I'm really excited to be discussing the important topic of university, looking at what value does a university still have today, as well as the challenges that students have to face, especially when first starting out at university, where you have to adapt to such a different lifestyle for most, and there's challenges along the way that need to be overcome. So we're going to be discussing those, as well as how can a student prepare for university life to make the transition much smoother. So to discuss these really important and interesting topics, we are delighted to be joined by a student from the University of Warwick who's currently studying economics. He's in his first year, and it's his second time of joining GenZ Talk. So I'd like to welcome back Ejaz Uddin. Welcome back, Ejaz.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really, this is a very interesting topic. There's a lot to say on this one, so can't wait to kind of delve deep into the topics.
Well, perhaps we can dive straight into it. And I just want to, university, Ejaz, has been quite often come under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of negativity from people who are questioning the value it still offers, the costs compared to the outcome after you graduate from university in terms of what jobs you can get. Why did you choose to go to university? What factors did you consider?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it's quite funny. I think it's almost like split into two things. So I think it's almost like there's a difference in why in year 12 I decided, oh, this is the reason I want to go to university. And then it's funny how it changed in year 13, especially during lockdown. So I think initially for me, I was definitely that kind of very standardized, like all about education, didn't really do anything outside my time. And I was very like, let me just get my head down, get my A levels, my grades on top. And, I essentially worked really hard for that element. Like, again, like anything extracurricular, it was always related back to academics. There was never anything beyond that. So, like going to like summer schools or like, any sort of events hosted by universities. And I was always focused on that element. And again, I think that just came from just a general passion for economics. And again, I never really explored beyond that. To be honest, I'd never really considered the societies, the kind of the sports that university offered, or even the kind of the social life. For me, it was very academic focused. And I think, when kind of lockdown, kind of came onto us, and, I kind of had a lot of free time. And I was thinking, that's when, again, as I mentioned in, our previous talk, I started going on LinkedIn, now involved in a startup, started getting involved and meeting a lot of different people and broadening my perspective. That's when I realized that, I'm going to university for a different reason. For me, academics only plays a part of that. Like, I think the issue is in terms of the debate about university. Again, people might, differ with me on this kind of view, but I think people see it as a single lens. They see it as just, people going for the academics, going for the first degree, and that's it. That's all that there is to university. However, when I've actually spoken to a lot of people in terms of, it's quite funny, like I've spoken to people that have, one of my great friends, he did engineering at Cambridge, and his current job is as a coach, as a life coach. And you'd think, someone that looked through that single lens would think that's an absolute waste of time. You didn't use anything about your engineering, nothing at all. But when I speak to him, he's like, he would never have changed anything, because university allows you to seek what you truly want. Because I think it's a common theme that, a lot of people from their academics, they see, oh, they don't really enjoy this truly. Like, for example, even with myself, I think with the economics work I'm doing right now, while some elements are, interesting for me, some other elements don't really, kind of like resonate with me. And I think from that kind of it's almost like, antithesis, it's almost like because of that, me being like, I'm not really sure about that, it kind of redirects me to search elsewhere. And I think the true value of university comes from the societies that you kind of join, or, it doesn't even matter if you don't join societies. I think even the social life, I think having to be independent, having to kind of seek out, people. I think when people go for like apprenticeships or, take their own alternative routes, I think what people, again, like, they don't really consider about university is it's such a convenient time to really sit down and think about what you want. Because in other options, you kind of get thrust into the working world, or get thrust into, a certain area without exploring your options. And I think university makes you really sit down and think what you want, because that happened for me. Like, kind of, I have to admit, I fell behind the work for a tiny bit because just wasn't motivated. I think, especially, I think, you might ask later, but in terms of the challenge right now, in terms of university, is it's so hard to get motivated to do work and, stay consistent, and especially when, you're not able to do things outside. And I think that kind of feeds into the element of, now I kind of truly sat down and thought, okay, what do I want from life? Because I don't want to just stick down this academic route, So I think that for me, the true value of university is everything else it offers aside from the degree itself. Because that is, everyone that I've spoken to that has a degree, they won't tell you that university isn't, just about their degree. Their value came from everything that they experienced otherwise.
In addition to that, walk us through your first few weeks of starting university, because I would imagine a year ago, you probably weren't imagining that experience. So
Yeah.
how was this experience, especially during these challenging times?
I think that's honestly such a great question. I think for me is, I think a lot of people would resonate with this, or maybe just might be me, but when I was like kind of going into university, I had a game plan. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna join these societies, I'm gonna meet these kind of people, and I'm gonna do all of these amazing things. Everyone has their own game plan subconsciously of what they want to go into university with. And I think COVID has knocked that out the park. And I think with the first few weeks, it was tough to adjust in terms of, because again, you're quite confined to, because normally, you go to lecture halls, you get to naturally meet people, you get to do societies in person, you get to do sports. But the first few weeks, it was very, it was very different, having to do all of your lectures online. That, for me, that's a very different experience because, again, everything I have ever done up to that point was in person, or, it was purely revision afterwards. But having to actually learn content, motivate yourself, and really, I think, I think one thing that a lot of students, might want to consider is the kind of the schedule and the structure. School naturally gave you that structure. You went into school, you had that, almost like a 8 to 3 p.m., kind of routine. And again, when you went home, just do the work that you kind of did in lesson. Whereas now it's like you have to balance a lot of things, especially if you're living out, things that such as mundane, such as, literally going to the shops to get food or making food and trying to balance that with, your social life, or, any certain events that you want to go to, and then having to stay on top of your work. It requires a level of discipline.
Explain how you went from struggling and suffering with motivation to really kind of thinking, you know what, I'm just going to go for this. When was it that point, or do you remember a moment where you just came on top of you and you thought, this is it, I'm not taking this anymore, I'm taking this seriously?
I think, honestly, that's a great question. I think for me, it was, when I was, stuck in isolation, and I really just sat there and thought, I just saw all the pile of work I had to do. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, if I don't get on top of this, I'm going to drown in this, like, and it'll kind of consume me. And I think for me, the first thing that really comforted me was when I was like, speaking to other people online, or, my friends back home, or, that haven't, again, like in, similar situations to me. I think it made me realize, again, you're not alone in this, like you're not the only one. And I think that really gave me comfort, because not in a malicious way, it's more like I'm not going through this alone, everyone's going through this. I'm not isolated in this. And I think when I started realizing, like, wait a minute, like, even though we're in this unfortunate situation, there's no point of me kind of just sitting there and kind of accepting that reality. It's just like, I kind of sat there and thought, why do I have to accept this kind of, being behind the schedule, feeling down, feeling demotivated? And once I really sat there and thought, you know what, let me take time for myself to really think about, okay, what am I going to do to, catch up on this work? Because again, that was really bearing down on me. And almost thinking like to the future, because obviously right now we're in lockdown, so we can't really do much. But again, it's looking forward to the future next year, all the sports will open again, all the societies will, hopefully start integrating more in person. And looking forward to that, I think also, because naturally, I think it depends on whether you're living out and you're living at home. I think if you're living out, you'll naturally have your flatmates. And for me, my flatmates really helped me during this time. Like, being able to, again, we were all in the same situation. Like, we've kind of I think for me, it kind of really made me bond with my flatmates more. Kind of having those kind of conversations to be like, you know what, like, let's support each other. And I think I was naturally lucky that one of my flatmates does economics with me. So we kind of, like, kind of motivate each other, kind of keep each other on check. And for me, it was like having that accountability partner, kind of at the very least, someone kind of being there, almost be like, kind of check up on you. I think, and it's always, it's a reciprocal thing, you checking up on someone and then someone checking up on you. And I think, whoever that may be, whether that be a friend from back home, someone new at the uni, I think having someone there that you can kind of like always keep on top of, it's like you feel almost like you're bringing that homely, kind of sense to you, you're motivated. And yeah, I think for me, that accountability really like got me going. And for those living at home, I think it is a bit of a tougher one, it's in terms of, because again, like I have a few friends that are living at home and they feel quite left out, But I think one thing to note is, again, it's pretty much the same everywhere. And I think it's making the most of it right now, because if you kind of get down in the dumps, when that time comes where where you're able to go out, you just won't feel like that. And I think for me, it's being forward looking, and then being present in the moment as well. Like, accepting this reality and understand that, you know what, this is what it is. And I think it definitely took me a lot of reflection. I think I had to sit down and actually reflect, because before I let all the work consume me and overwhelm me. Whereas I just decided I've have enough, and let me just sit down and just be like, okay, I'm going to make the change today. And I think doing it now, that kind of do it now mentality, that really just changed the game for me.
To a 2021 uni student who's going to be applying to start next year, what advice can you give them in terms of how can they mentally prepare for university, so that the transition from school life, being at sixth form, college, going into university life, especially if they're living by themselves? Is there anything because obviously you've been through it now,
Yeah,
looking back, what would you have done differently? What advice would you give?
getting the kind of the basics right. It sounds so stupid, and like, everyone be like, yeah, I'll kind of sort of it. But again, I never really did that. I kind of had that same mentality, like, yeah, cooking, I'll think about that later. Oh yeah, I'll think about living by myself later. Or yeah, I'll think about, like what society's doing later. Like, didn't really kind of ponder on that too much. And I think, just having that preliminary look at, like what you kind of like, almost like segmenting it into different areas. Like, okay, what opportunities are there at university, that you want to take up, for example, whether that be, certain society positions or certain kind of volunteering opportunities, or, just to kind of get that sense of familiarity. I think for me, that's what really, because I hadn't, again, because of that whole A-level grade change, and, I mentioned it before, kind of switching universities, and because I didn't have that sense of familiarity, it kind of knocked me off. I kind of just jumped in the deep end and I kind of stayed there. So I think the advice I would give is, firstly, expect your plans not to go to plan. I think that's one thing. I think that has to be accepted, because I think everyone has gone through this, like, whether that be being behind on work or not doing, not joining certain, like not getting a certain position in society, etc. I think accepting that and making sure that, how to pivot towards, kind of new opportunities and something new to actually attach to, not just latching onto that old plan and staying rigid to it. I think flexibility is definitely a main thing. And number two is, again, just getting the basics right in terms of getting familiar with that university, in terms of what are the certain things, like, is there maybe, like even things like group chats, joining group chats early, like meeting people online. For me, that was a game changer. Meeting people online really helped me that transition, because the people that I'm meeting now, I've met through them initially online. One last thing, sorry to keep going on, but I think speaking to alumni or current students there, that helped me so much, because, especially again through LinkedIn, that was my main way. I spoke to, quite a few Warwick students, and they helped me so much, like, from speaking to someone that had been in the same accommodation that I had gotten, from someone that did the same course as me, understanding what the course was like to kind of just mentally prepare, and then just socially, kind of things that I'm experiencing right now, and I'm speaking to them right now, and how they dealt with it. Again, it all relates back to that familiarity for me. Again, I think not being too hard on yourself and taking it as you go, and yeah, kind of get that sense of familiarity, because it will help you so much.